So this is my first time on a night bus. Basically, night bus in India, they've beds in them. Well, if you book a double, they could put anyone in with you. I didn't know this, so I booked a double thinking I'd have more room, but you have to book two if you wanted to yourself. I realised this, so I could have some random bloke in this like tiny little box sleeping beside me, which I did not fancy at all. A few stops for food, the roadside places, they didn't look the most sanitary or appealing, so I literally lived on crisps and Oreos. People said, oh, the buses are a nightmare. I actually slept. I got some sleep. Found it alright. But yeah, interesting hearing the horns and the chaos of an Indian dual carriageway. Having said that, I only got one more night bus on the trip. That was Varanasi back to Delhi. I said after that, I was like, nah, I need proper sleep, and because even though I did sleep, it's still not proper sleep. So I'm just gonna fly from now on, because flying wasn't that expensive, you know. Interesting as well that the buses, they're like full of goods as well. So like under all the seats and under all the beds, there was like sacks of like food and produce. So they doubled up. Found it funny, all the buses, they had like just like a random Adidas logo on them, or like Mercedes, as if to say they're fancy. But yeah, two drivers, they switched, and as you can imagine, the bus drivers are as crazy as you think they would be. Reached Varanasi early the next morning. Yeah, again, the minute you get off the bus, about 10 tuk-tuk drivers swarming you, trying to get you to get in their tuk-tuk. Straight away, yeah, people trying to scam me, trying to rip me off, as usual. But the reason Varanasi is so significant in Hinduism, it's one of Hinduism's 7 sacred cities. It's also known as the City of Light, based on the sacred river Ganges. It's believed to offer liberation, or moksha, from the cycle of rebirth for those who die there. So therefore it's seen as a major pilgrimage centre for bathing, cremation and spiritual solace. Now the river Ganges itself, why is that seen as sacred? Geographically, the river passes from the Himalayas through India and Bangladesh to the Bay of Bengal. It sustains life for over 650 million people through agriculture, farming, things like that. It's also heavily polluted, unfortunately. But in spiritual terms, it's seen as the personification of the Hindu god Ganga. Ganga is seen as a divine mother who brings purity, liberation and salvation to humanity. As a result, waters of the Ganges are seen to bring life and liberation, and bathing in these waters can bring that liberation and cleanse of sins. Now, as a result of all this, the Hindus believe that dying in Varanasi breaks the cycle of reincarnation and eventually bring liberation or moksha. Now, I'm not very well versed in Hinduism, but that's from what I've been told, and as far as I can see, that's the reason the city and the river is considered so holy. Now, when I arrived in Varanasi, I arrived quite early in the morning, so I got to see the sunrise over the Ganges, which was quite nice to see. Now the city itself I found extremely cramped. It's chaos, the whole place is sensory overload. Because even though it has about 3 million people, so it will by no means be anywhere near the biggest cities in India, the land area, the area it's based on is quite small, it's quite concentrated. It's also one of the oldest continuously lived in cities in the world, or continuously inhabited cities in the world. So it's basically made up of these tiny little alleys, and you'd have everything from cows to motorbikes flying through these alleys, so you have to watch out that a motorbike might be coming through. There are so many people there, it's quite cramped, it's quite chaotic. In terms of cows, like any Indian city, but particularly in Varanasi, you'll see a lot of cows wandering around, which it's amazing seeing in these tiny little alleys that you've got cows wandering up and down. I was afraid sometimes I might be charged by a cow or a bull, but they seem quite used to humans anyway. This is because in Hinduism, cows are revered as motherly figures, so they're revered as sacred symbols of life, giving and motherhood. For this reason, cows are sacred and they're adored. Many Hindus do not consume any meat. India is one of the biggest vegetarian populations in the world, so that is one positive of India. I found the vegetarian food quite good, because usually vegetarian food I find in the West is usually like an imitation of non-vegetarian food that doesn't really work, whereas they have like entirely different diets. So you'd have like vegetarian curries and things like that, which were actually, I found, quite delicious, but they certainly wouldn't consider any cow meat, but most of them, a lot of them wouldn't consider any meat whatsoever. So I was wondering the alleyways and lanes of Varanasi, but I went to check into my hotel. I was out checking early, lucky enough, and get some rest. And then one of my first priorities was I wanted to go for a riverboat tour or a cruise on the Ganges. Now, my hotel itself wasn't actually that nice. Because the hotels were quite cheap in India, I ended up staying in a lot of hotels. In terms of meeting people and linking in, I think I'd recommend hostels are better, because you'd find a lot of people in similar situations, solo traveling, things like that. I showed on that in Varanasi, so I ended up getting very lonely, because mostly my hotel was just full of pilgrims. There's, besides the view of the Ganges, which is quite nice and it's quite reasonably priced, my hotel room essentially felt like a bit of a prison. It was downstairs, kind of cut off in the basement. But I ended up, no one's really socialised with. Because the holy city, there's not many bars around. Wasn't even a bar in the hotel. I managed to get a Kingfisher in the hotel kind of cafe, I'd call it. But everyone else was in bed early, so I was essentially sitting there drinking my Kingfisher on my own. That was like about 9:30. It wasn't even late, so I ended up turning it in quite early. Actually, when I got to my hotel, there was actually a snake charmer outside, which is quite rare in India these days because it's illegal now. But then when I came back out after having a rest, he was gone. Would have been interesting to see that, but they're a dying breed, because they're deemed cruel to snakes, so you can't really find them anymore. But I managed to find, there's a guy, some young lad, asking about boat tours. Obviously you're very suspicious in India. About people offering boat tours or offering anything, particularly somewhere like Varanasi. There's a lot of scams around. They take advantage of pilgrim and tourists alike. But we agreed 1,000 rupees, which is like £10, to bring me up and down the river. I was happy with that, I have to say. This kid, fair play to him, even though probably could have gotten it cheaper. I was happy with it, he was happy, and he honoured his word. He kept to his word. He didn't ask for any more. That was a great way. I really recommend a great way to see the city. He even let me attempt to row the boat, which is a bit of a disaster. I end up just going around in circles aimlessly.
This one. Just one.
was interesting on the river because you would see cows, dead cows that are like tied to boats for good luck, which was interesting to see. It's amazing just seeing the river function, people going about their business, people using it to do business, tourist boats everywhere. That was very interesting. Part of Varanasi obviously is where Hindus go to die. So my understanding is that by being cremated by the Ganges and having their ashes placed in the Ganges, they can achieve moksha or liberation and escape the cycle of reincarnation and eventually achieve liberation, is my understanding. So I wanted to go see so basically Varanasi is made up of what's called like ghats. They're basically like terraces on the riverfront. Some of these is where the cremations occur. The one I went to, as far as I know, 150 cremations occur a day. I requested the guy that was bringing me on the boat to bring me to one. The cremation process, it costs about $200 to get the wood and things like that. Obviously, people from poorer backgrounds, they come to Varanasi with no money when they know they're going to die. They essentially have to raise that money before they die so they can pay to be cremated. They can take a few hours to burn. So we arrived where the cremations were taking place. I disembarked, there's a guy waiting for me there. The guy was bringing me on the boat. He didn't say anything because obviously it might affect his business, but I could tell he was a bit wary of this guy who was where the cremations were taking place. He brought me, showed me around. I didn't take any pictures. One, out of respect, people who've passed away, people who are mourning their family members, and two, as far as I know, I've been told that they believe it disrupts the cremation process or the reincarnation process or achieving liberation if someone photographs somebody while they're being cremated. So I respected that, of course. The cremation pyres are lit by a flame that has been burning for 3,000 years allegedly, through war, through famine, through pandemics, through everything. So usually, as far as I know, the son of the deceased would, if possible, usually light the pyre on fire, start the cremation process. We could see people doing that. What made me uncomfortable was the guy that was showing me around. First of all, he was explaining how much it costs to cremate someone, which I double checked online. It is true in terms of the cost for wood and services like that. But he was saying that there's a hospice there, which is true as well. But he was then requesting me to pay money, $200 to him, which I actually would be happy to contribute. Obviously, people who are quite impoverished, help them at the end of their life. But the issue, as mentioned earlier with India, is you don't know who to trust, and based on this guy and his behaviour, I just didn't trust him whatsoever. You kind of get a vibe off people. He didn't seem honest whatsoever. I don't think that money would have went to anyone, so I refused. I gave him some money for showing me around, but that was it. I thought it was highly inappropriate where people are mourning their relatives to be asking for money, showing tourists around. I made sure to be respectful, keep to the side to witness it. He offered, he said I could take pictures, but I knew you weren't meant to do that. I certainly wouldn't be impressed if I was at a relative's funeral or cremation and some tourist was there taking pictures. Key there is to be respectful. It was certainly a very unique experience. You can obviously smell the bodies being cremated. But I got back in the boat, and the kid that was bringing me around, he was kind of like, "Did you give him money?" And I was like, "Not much." And he kind of seemed impressed, so I think he knew what he was on about as well. I'm not sure I particularly liked Varanasi. It was certainly a unique experience. I don't know if I'd go again. Like, as I said, it was quite lonely. I'd stay in a hostel next time, so at least I'd people that can hang around with or whatever. Lots of police around the city. There's some crazy interactions there. Like, as I said, the whole place is sensory overload because the population is 3 million in this tiny area. So it's just constant madness. But even, yeah, my first experience trying to bargain and barter, because I went to buy some clothes and some souvenir scarves. This guy straight away spotted me. He's like, oh yeah, I'll bring you here. We're going through the market, through all of the back streets, and eventually he brings me in. I'm so suspicious, you could probably tell. And he's like, oh, have a seat. And he had his wife made me some chai, gave me some chai. To be fair, it was a good experience. He's trying to charge me like 3,000 rupees for this scarf, and I was like, apparently top quality material, and I was like, no, I could tell it was manufactured. Eventually I agreed 1,000 rupees, which is like £10 a scarf, and I got myself some clothes relatively cheap, so everyone was happy. He's happy in the end. Made a deal. I probably paid over the odds, but it was an experience, you know, it was worth it. I wouldn't say I got overly scammed or anything. Also, I went to Domino's. So I said I'd try Domino's in India, because as I said, I'm very adventurous with food. Funny enough, though, I found out afterwards that Bald and Bankrupt was in this exact Domino's and apparently got food poisoning from it. But there was me trying to play it safe. I'm like, have pizza, you can't get food poisoning from that. But apparently Bald and Bankrupt did. The funny thing was that it was like, the drink was tiny. The drink was like this big. And I was like, geez, the Americans would have a field day here. Like, and obviously it's hot, so you're really thirsty. Like, I literally finished the drink before my pizza was even ready. I had to buy 3 drinks in the end, because they said, do you have a bigger size drink? And they're like, no, that's the biggest we have. And I'm like, okay, maybe they ran out. But there's some crazy experiences you have in India. I think, like, India kind of desensitizes you to an extent, because unfortunately there's a lot of kids that are working, kids that are hustling, kids that are trying to scam you. So I think it desensitizes you to an extent. And so I have a story. I went to buy a bottle of water from a street vendor, and when buying water you always make sure it's sealed, obviously, because you don't want to have some tap water and get sick. The guy, as usual, didn't have any change, so I gave 500 rupees as far as I can remember. But obviously water is much cheaper than that. So he said that he would give me a packet of cigarettes instead. And a funny thing about, I find in India, they have the cigarette packets, like in Ireland and the UK and Australia, as far as I know, that they're the blank cigarette packets, so they can't advertise, they have all the health warnings on them. But I find that very ironic in India, because you're constantly going around in this intense smog. Like, I actually got a sinus infection when I was there, because you're constantly going through this smog and pollution. Like, when you go inside and the AC hits you, you have like a taste of petrol at the back of your throat, and it's only when you go inside you realise it. So you're constantly breathing in this smog, which I would say would have a much worse health effect, but then they're warning you not to smoke. But yeah, he gave me cigarettes as change. I don't smoke. So there's these kids, and they were like, oh, how many cigarettes do you smoke a day? And I said I'd wind them up, and I was like 20. And they're like, oh yeah, we do 30. Normalised, because you see like kids smoking, kids working. I didn't even think about it. The advantage, I was still kind of jet lagged, not getting proper sleep. The advantage of that was I got to wake up and see the sunrise every morning in the Ganges, and that was very peaceful. Seeing people starting to work, set up their boat, people on the river early on. I like that. The only thing was I got absolutely destroyed by mosquitoes. So the weird thing is I get destroyed by mosquitoes in Europe. I did in India. Now luckily where I was in India about 10 years ago, I would have needed malaria tablets, but malaria is actually one of the diseases that it's predicted in the coming years will actually be eradicated worldwide. It's still only quite common in Africa. It used to be common practically all over the world. In India, it's essentially been eradicated except some very specific areas. So there's not much of a malaria risk, so I didn't need any malaria tablets. However, I got absolutely destroyed by mosquitoes. I think I might have an allergy, because the bites all swell up mad and they're so itchy for days. So Indian toilets, haven't talked about them yet. When I was in Agra, it was Western style toilets, but now in this hotel it's proper Indian style toilets. So either the squatting toilet, they do Western toilets, but they do not use toilet paper. So they have either this like kind of tap that you can like it's like a shower hose, and use that to, let's just say, clean yourself after doing your business, which wasn't too bad. But they also, the more traditional way is they have a bucket, and I won't go into the details, but you basically use your hand and you use the water, and I think traditionally you only use one hand. Had the like shower hose thing to use. In Kashmir though, a lot of places didn't have this, so the only option was the bucket. But we won't talk about that. The next thing to do in Varanasi was the evening ritual by the Ganges. So I wasn't sure what this ritual meant at first, but after checking it out, it's called the Ganga Aarti. Basically occurs every evening at sunset, and it involves priests chanting rituals, fire, and lasts about 45 minutes. So basically it's to honor the goddess Ganga with fire. So the ritual symbolizes devotion, gratitude, and the removal of darkness through fire. So this serves as spiritual purification for attendees through the offering of light to the goddess Ganga. I've never seen anything like this before. It's pretty amazing, to be honest, particularly seeing all the boats watching it and the different rituals, different things like that. So that's certainly a must-see when in Varanasi. A lot of pilgrims watching it, a lot of tourists watching it, and everyone over the river was watching it. So all the boats parked up and you could watch from the river. Now, another one of the processes for Hindu pilgrims, aside from bathing in the Ganges, is offering oil lamps and flowers. It's called Diya Dan, which represents a spiritual act of releasing prayers, honouring ancestors, and seeking divine blessings. So basically, you can buy them fairly cheaply. There's these little girls, they were going around selling them. Bought some off them. Basically, yeah, it's a little candle flower, and then you put it in to offer it to the goddess Ganga as an offering, as a spiritual offering. It symbolizes letting go of personal worries, sorrow, or ego, and allowing it to be carried away by the sacred river. So I lit mine up, meant to release it in the evening. So it is nice. When I was on the terrace of where I was staying, you could see them all floating along the river. I was paranoid releasing mine, so I was like, I don't want to set a boat on fire or something, to go into a boat and set on fire. So I found a strategic place to release mine, and then almost immediately the light went out and it sank, which I thought was bad karma. But it turns out it's actually the opposite. It's a sign of good luck, because it means that Ganga has accepted my offering. So that was a good omen for the rest of the trip, even though I didn't know it at the time. But there we go. Also, another interesting thing about Varanasi is the presence of agora. So basically, they're well known as a cannibal tribe. They are present in the city, but they live generally the other side of the Ganges. The people have made documentaries about them. I must highlight that they're not connected to mainstream Hinduism, but basically they cannibalize people's remains that they find in the river. They cover themselves in human ashes they found in the river. There is cannibals present, so I found that a bit unnerving, but as I said, I must stress they're not mainstream Hinduism. Basically kind of go against orthodox beliefs. They find that everything's useful, whether it be deceased human corpses or even if someone's excrement, they'll eat that as well, apparently. But that was the end of my time in Varanasi. Certainly something different. found the place a bit overwhelming. Didn't help, I was covered in mosquito bites, so I eventually had to go to the doctor and get cream for that. That was another experience, trying to find a doctor and explain what was wrong with me and get the appropriate cream. But yeah, I found it just complete sensory overload, very overwhelming. People constantly like coming up to you, trying to sell you stuff, trying to get you to buy stuff. Yeah, not for the faint-hearted. Certainly glad I went. It was an experience. Not sure I'd go again. But then I had the next challenge, which was trying to get my night bus back to Delhi. So as mentioned before, there's not bus stations, there's not bus stops. So basically me and the tuk-tuk driver, I'm trying to explain where the bus stops, and turned out it's some service station on the outskirts of Varanasi. We found it eventually. I got there in plenty of time. Yet again, as mentioned, the issue is you don't know if the bus is going to be 5 hours late, you don't know if it's going to be there on time. So you're essentially stuck like in some random suburb, maybe by a service station with very little services otherwise, waiting on your bus. You don't know when it's going to come. Lucky enough, as far as I can remember, I think this one was delayed, but it was only like an hour or something. But once I got on the bus, I decided that that's enough of the night buses for me. Certainly on that trip, no more night buses. I think if they were on time, I'd be able to do it or make plans. Was just you can't really make any plans if they're so delayed the whole time. Overnight, I never really ate properly on them because I was afraid to eat. I didn't want to get poisoned at the service stations. Even Indian people have told me not to eat at the service stations. Fairly like sketchy. They're not like service stations we imagine. It's kind of just like someone cooking up like barbecue essentially in the corner. So I decided that was enough night buses for me. Good experience, has to be done. But air travel is quite cheap in India, so I just saw it as unnecessary. Maybe again someday, but not for me. But lucky this time I had my own area, because I made sure to book my own area this time. I didn't want someone sleeping in with me. I got lucky the last time that I managed to avoid that as well. But yeah, I'm on my way back to Delhi, because after Delhi I was heading to Kashmir, which was certainly an experience, certainly something different. When I went, there was only 5,000 Westerners had went the previous year, so not many Westerners there at all. But however, there was 5 million Indian tourists that went to Indian administered Kashmir the previous year. The Foreign Office, basically every Western government tells you not to go there under any circumstances. So did my own research, I thought it was safe. I decided to give it a go, but I'll talk about that in the next video.
Break, it's raining so big.